We'll be looking at today learning outcome 2, and just wanted to confirm with regards to before we start a couple of things. So how many of you went through some of the handouts or looked at some of the videos that we discussed yesterday? So did you get the time to go through the videos in particular, if not the handouts? Anybody went through the videos?
No, for me, Portia, because I was working.
All right, okay, no worries. So what I would suggest is, I know I'm not putting anybody on the spot here, but just wanting to make sure that, you know, you go ahead and obviously watch those videos. There are lots of videos available on YouTube, but after watching in about, 50, 60 of them, I shortlisted these videos because they are to the point. Some of them are lectures which are 1 hour long, some of them are half an hour long, but they are just about the right length to give you an overview or a good summary of, what the various different systems in the human body are. And they tend to be, quite useful because they will help you to understand in a very concise, summarized, filtered way, whichever way you put it, that how these systems actually work in the human body. Now, because this unit is about the aspects of human physiology. So when I say the meaning of the word aspect, or aspect essentially, what do you mean by that? The meaning of aspect, essentially, if you look at the dictionary meaning, is it's a particular part or feature of something. So because we are looking at studying what is called the aspects of human physiology, so here you're looking at studying a particular part or a feature of the human body. And that is why, it is quite important for us to understand, because these are the basic minimum systems that, nurses in particular, or healthcare workers in particular, or, GPs in particular are kind of very well aware of. And when we talk about the aspects of human physiology, so here looking at studying specific part or features of the human body to be able to understand how it functions. So that is why, although, as I mentioned, there are 12 different organ systems in the human body, but these 6, along with the endocrine system, the 7th one, are important to understand, or at least you should have a sight or an overview of them in terms of what, essentially how they function and what they do. And that helps the, human body actually function. So when we talk about the aspects of human physiology, we are looking at understanding, the basic behavior of how the organ systems actually work. So it is important, again, not just to watch the videos, but also to look at some of the associated handouts that are provided. And these handouts should give you a very good and detailed overview of each of these systems. Now, in today's learning outcome, taking on from there, in today's learning outcome, we are looking at studying, learning outcome 2. And as I mentioned earlier, this unit, as you can see in the top, it says mentions graded. This is one of the specialist units in nursing. This has 6 credit values. So your aim should be to achieve distinction in this particular unit. So having a thorough understanding of the human, body and the various systems is going to help you essentially to achieve that grade. Now, going back to today, we are looking at studying learning outcome 2, which talks about the process, understanding the process of what is called homeostasis. So we'll go into understanding what is homeostasis and how is the endocrine system suited. That means out of all the different types of systems that we study, your different organ systems like nervous system, digestive system, cardiovascular system, respiratory system, excretory system. Why is the endocrine system very important and is the most important system which helps in maintaining what is called the internal environment of the body? So when we look at the internal environment of the body, just put on your thinking hats. So what do we mean by the internal environment of the body? Internal environment of the body is, we've heard sometimes when you say, what is your body temperature? So the body temperature is generally 37.5 degrees centigrade. When we look at, is your, when you look at your blood glucose level, or you look at blood sugars in your body, you look at the amount of insulin in your body, you look at, say, for example, salts in your body. We talk about things like the pH balance of your body. When we sometimes also look at, we talk about the things like, for example, I have acidity or I have acidic reflex in the body when I eat food. Now, these are all things which are related to what the internal environment of the body is. That means the human body has a particular, let's say, features which allow it to function in a way wherein if all these things are balanced, then what you're going to see is that these features would essentially allow the body to, function effectively. When I say function effectively, what I mean by that is that the internal environment of the body, the cells, the tissues, the organs, the organ systems that we discussed yesterday, the cellular level of the organization, they kind of function well. That means they require the optimal temperature. In some cases, the environment, when I talk about, which is basically fluid environment or some sort of an environment essentially, which is fluid, which is inside the cells and the tissues and the organs, they are at a certain equilibrium which allows these organs to function, or the tissues, and if I go down to the cellular level, the organelles to function. So this internal environment of the body, which is found within cells, and cells, when I say, I would start with organelle, then I go to molecule, then I go to tissue, then I go to, say, for example, the organ, and then finally the organ system. They are going to be existing in equilibrium, which means that they will have the right temperature, right, fluid mixture to be able to work effectively. That means they can work in their own environment. That means they are able to work within the environment of, say, for example, whether if they need acidic environment, whether they need alkaline environment, they would get the nutrients and the perfect conditions to be able to thrive. So when do we talk in terms of this internal state of the body that we refer to, and when we look at the overall concepts of how the body actually, let's say, gives us indications that there is something not well, or there is something which is not going well in terms of either the temperature of the body is too high, or the pH level is too low or too high, or the iron concentrations, nutrient levels, or different types of things in terms of the environment, as we call them, are required. They are not working, or they are not essentially as required. Then in those cases, the proper functioning of these cells and the organ systems is not possible. So this particular bit, and yesterday we touched on one of the key aspects, which is called hormones, which we termed as chemical messengers. So these hormones essentially work in togetherness with the nervous system, and hormones are essentially a part of the endocrine system, which are chemical messengers released by different organs within the body, like pituitary, adrenal gland, thymus, thyroid. When we look at the reproductive organs like the testicles and ovaries, so they release hormones, which are chemical messengers, which help in this regulation of the internal environment of the body. And this is carried through in terms of signals, as in terms of, say, for example, this message. If, for example, you are not feeling well and the body temperature is quite high, this message would be carried through the chemical messengers, which are hormones in the blood, to the brain, and your body would start reacting in a particular way. So this concept of the body trying to maintain the equilibrium, or a state which is going to allow it to function normally, would be the state that we will study in the process called homeostasis. And when this is not in equilibrium, what will happen is that there will be different actions or reactions which will be triggered in the body, and that would allow the body and the various organ systems to essentially understand what is not right, and they would try to then, with the use of chemicals like hormones, would try to maintain that balance. And in some cases, when things do not go as well and the body is overwhelmed because of the infection or other bits, then in those cases we need to take help. And what help that means is that we take help of medication. We see a doctor, and different types of medication are then provided to bring this pH, this particular balance, pH, temperature, iron, nutrient levels back into the body. And a classic example that I would mention here is somebody when then undergoes surgery, for example. When the surgery happens, there is a lot of loss of blood because of maybe whatever reasons in terms of, with surgery, which is being done in order to replace an organ or, extract a tissue, whatever it is, there's a lot of loss of blood. And when surgery happens, if And if you have noticed that when people are have to undergo surgery, they obviously get admitted in the hospital 2 or 3 days in advance. The hospital would give them balanced diet. That balanced diet would essentially mean that they would be given controlled diet, which will be controlled in terms of the nutrients the body is asked to consume. And that would essentially make the systems of your body much more conducive to receiving or having a surgery. So people are normally given boiled food, for example. They're given liquid foods in particular. And then when you have had a surgery, you don't immediately come out of the anesthesia. So obviously, because you have to be taken care of, and you are there is post-surgical surgery or operative care required, then in those cases your body is not functioning well. So sometimes what you are done, what the doctors and the consultants do, because your body is deprived of certain functions, they would normally recommend saline solution or glucose solution to be put in, directly injected into the blood. And this is because your body, although you might not be in a state wherein you might be unconscious or you might be under the effect of the anesthesia, but in this case, the body and body organs and organ systems need nutrient, and they would be provided through the infusion of glucose or blood glucose, sugar, or for example, in some cases, different solutions which are normally fed in through the intravenous into your body, which would allow the other body and organ systems to essentially continue to function. So when we look at this particular example, you would generally see that it is the case wherein the body after the surgery is now going to be restored to its optimal conditions, and these optimal conditions which are going to be useful for the body, and the body would obviously take time after the surgery, but till such time it starts to resume these functions on its own, you would be given externally glucose feed, or your blood glucose levels would be monitored, and if you need more glucose or glucogen, essentially it will be fed through into your body through the intravenous route, and that would allow the body and the organs and the cells and various organ systems to get nutrients, which would allow it to continue to function in the same usual or effective way as it normally does when you are functional and you're conscious, and obviously you're doing activities. So when we look at this particular aspect of how the body maintains the internal environment, it refers to the various physiological parameters like temperature, pH levels, iron concentrations, nutrient levels in your body, which are crucial for the proper functioning of the cells and organs. Now, sometimes people are, if most of you should know that your heart requires sodium, and it beats because it requires a certain, concentration of sodium. So when normally we see in elderly, if the heart muscles become weakened, then normally you're given more iron infusion, and you're given to increase the iron infusion is normally given to increase your hemoglobin. The hemoglobin increase in your blood allows the red blood cells to carry more oxygen, and more oxygen is reaching more parts of the organs and your parts of the body would allow the body to function normally, because in this case, the muscles would be perspiring in a normal and a natural way, because they get the full quantity of oxygen required to be able to convert the stored energy, which is fat, into energy, and that requires the cells, and that allows the cells to function normally. But in some cases, people are given a pacemaker, or they are given additional quantities of sodium. In some cases, you are given some GTN sprays, which would essentially slow down your heart, because your body requires the heart to pump blood, in a way wherein it is able to excrete or send out the carbon dioxide, but it is unable to do so because of blockages or other bits which happen in the cardiovascular system. But these are ways through which we or the body tries to maintain the internal environment. That is, the body has the ability to regulate and keep these parameters, which are basically physiological parameters, in check. And there is a range in which these parameters have to be present. So, for example, when we talk about good cholesterol and bad cholesterol, there is a particular range in which this particular cholesterol needs to be present. The good cholesterol helps clean the arteries, keeps the blood flowing, and obviously makes the blood less viscous, which allows it to flow, let's say through the arteries and veins in a much more, easier manner. But if the bad cholesterol increases, that means it starts to clog the arteries. And this physiological balance, which the body tries to maintain by regulating the temperature, the pH level, the iron concentrations, the nutrient levels, is the way through which the body tries to maintain its perfect working environment. And that is what we are going to be looking at studying today when we talk about, learning outcome 2. So any questions on this so far? Clear? Now, when we look at the contents of learning outcome 2, we are looking at first going into details of what is homeostasis. We look at what is body's internal environment. We look at why does the process of homeostasis provide positive and negative feedback mechanism, and what is this positive and negative feedback mechanism. We look at studying this through the examples of blood glucose level or osmoregulation. We'll then relate it to the endocrine system and hormonal control. And then we look at the location of different glands of endocrine system in the body and why they are located in certain different positions. Human body, is a very complex organization. So there are strategic positions in which these glands are present within the humans, and they are basically helping in regulation of what is called the physiological conditions within the body. And these parameters, which these hormones actually control, are regulated to support the proper functioning of cells and organs. And this is the fundamental concept in biology that we need to understand. And this is governed by the principles of homeostasis. And that is why this is very, very important. So let's look at understanding, first of all, what is homeostasis. Now, when we talk about homeostasis, what we are essentially meaning is, as I mentioned, this is a fundamental concept in biology. This refers to the process through which the body self-regulates its systems by introducing or managing the concentration of different parameters in the body. And these parameters typically include your glucose level, your temperature, your water content. You look at your pH concentration in the body, and you look at other parameters which are related to iron concentration or concentration of vitamins or different minerals which are required for these cells and organs to function properly. Now, a lot of us have been to GP in our younger days, and we do see campaigns by the NHS which typically advertise that we should eat our 5 a day, or we should eat our fruit and veg and things like that. Now, the reason why these are recommended is because these fruit and veg and these particular different types of fruits and vegetables have what are called various ingredients in them which are vital for the functioning of the human body. So when you eat banana, it has potassium. When you eat something else, it has magnesium. When you eat something else, say for example, it has zinc. So when you eat something, it has more of, say for example, certain types of vitamins or minerals. And say for example, people say you should drink milk because it has high concentrations of calcium. Sometimes we say you should eat more of green veg. It is because it has more concentration of iron in it, and that is required for the body to have good levels of hemoglobin. And good levels of hemoglobin mean your body is able to carry good levels of oxygen, and that helps the body to perspire and obviously most of the organ systems to function well. So when we do talk about homeostasis, what we are trying to ensure is that the various physiological parameters that I've named so many times, say for example now, temperature, blood glucose levels, water level, pH concentration, iron concentration, they need to remain in a particular narrow and optimal range. And this particular narrow and optimal range, despite the external changes the body is facing or the external challenges the body is facing. For example, I don't wear a jumper, I don't wear a hood on, a proper jacket, and I step out today. It's 1 degree outside in Manchester. So my body would suddenly get a shock, and that shock would mean that I would either start sneezing, I would probably develop a running nose if I don't wear something warm, or if I don't go back inside, it might even essentially harm, because what will happen is the body would absorb the cold quite quickly, and that would mean I might get cramps or pain, some sort of muscles pain, because I've exposed my body to extreme cold without having to wear or have a protective covering or layer on my body to keep it warm. So what that is doing is, if you think, when I step out and it's 1 degree without proper woolens or clothing, what that would mean is it would alter the body's temperature. And altering of the body's temperature, because it's extremely cold outside and the body is absorbing cold, what that would mean is the body itself would start showing some reactions. And those reactions essentially would be sneezing, coughing, maybe a running nose. I might start to rub my hands to make myself warm, or in some cases, it would mean that I might get some muscle, pain, because I've suddenly stepped out of, an environment of 25, 26, which is in the house, and I've suddenly gone to 1 degree. So if you see this, external change, which the body is, external challenge, which the body is faced with, and the body then trying to normally restore the equilibrium, that means your heart rate would slow down slightly, your organs would start constricting to a certain extent to conserve heat. And in this particular reaction which starts to happen within the body would then also produce some positive and some negative reaction. Then the negative reactions would be the reactions which the body will be trying to essentially counteract through the process of homeostasis. That means it will try and regulate and give messages within the brain. Different chemicals would be released to say, shall we start looking at an option wherein I can get warm clothing, or can I get a cup of tea or a coffee, a warm cup of tea or coffee? You would essentially become alert. And what would tend to happen is that your body would try to start giving off signals internally to your brain to say that I need this or I need that in order for me to be able to survive or go back to normal operations. So this self-regulation, the mechanism which will set in, which will detect these changes in the internal conditions and then initiate responses to counteract these changes, would be termed as one of the parts of homeostasis, which is self-regulation. So what the body is trying to do and the signals that it's trying to send to your brain would be to say, let's form a warm place. Is there a fire somewhere around? Or can you get a warm cup of, hot cup of tea or coffee to become a bit more warm? Can you put on a layer of clothing? Or can you get inside into a restaurant? Those are the kind of things that the body would start giving you signals of. And that, in a way, are the key aspects of what the body is trying to do, which is fundamental in biology, that it is trying to go back to a state of self-regulating through this process of homeostasis to ensure that you are able to survive. Now, apart from this, what the homeostasis also does as a process is it helps in maintaining stability. So the main purpose of this chemical process which happens within the body, which is homeostasis, is to keep your internal conditions relatively constant in a narrow range, but keeping it constant. Narrow or optimal range, if I put it this way, but keeping it constant. So this provides stability to your organs and organ systems to function optimally, and that would allow you to also, your body to adapt to the external factors or challenges which it is facing. Now, some of the examples of, homeostasis that I've given, one is obviously your body trying to regulate, the body temperature. When you step out, definitely, immediately into the cold without preparation. Your blood sugar levels, the body tries to control your blood sugar levels by releasing insulin or glucagon. So if your sugars are low, you feel lethargic, your body will release glucagon. But if your sugars are high, the body will release insulin to dissolve those sugars so that the organs and organ systems are able to, function well. One of the things that we do get to see when you have diarrhea, you are normally given an electrolyte solution, which is to maintain the chemical equilibrium in your body, because your body, and you go to, your body loses nutrients and vital nutrients because you are having to go again and having loose stools because of diarrhea. One of the immediate remedies which is given by the doctors or recommended by the doctors is to take an electrolyte solution, which is to restore the pH balance or the nutrient balance in your body. And that again helps in the process or regulation of the process of the internal environment of the body, and that is again homeostasis. Now, we also look at homeostasis primarily because of the fact that it is deeply rooted into the basic understandings of how the organisms function, or how the human body essentially functions, and how it adapts to the natural environment or the challenges that it faces when it goes into the natural environment. Now, one of the examples of homeostasis is the regulation of blood sugar. So this is an example of regulation of blood sugar in your body. Now, how does this work and how does this happen? So let's look at a couple of things. When you look at the endocrine system in particular, and now let me bring across a picture of the endocrine system, and let's discuss that from that particular point. Now, when we look at the, say for example, the endocrine system, let me just bring a picture in. So if we look at the endocrine system, these are the various organs which actually comprise the endocrine system. So if I just for a minute make this slightly smaller and put it in context. Now, we look at the endocrine system. These are the various glands which basically form the endocrine system. So you have the pituitary gland in the skull, just in the back side of your skull. It's a very small gland. You have the thyroid in your neck. You have the thymus, which is just near your food pipe. You have the adrenal glands, which are above your kidneys. You have the pancreas. And in the reproductive organs, you have the testicle or the ovaries, depending on male and female. Now, when you have more sugar in your blood, or in some cases when you have less sugar in your blood, there are different reactions which occur within your body. And when I look at, if there is more sugar in your blood, then what will happen is, for example, you take a cupcake and you eat a couple of them. You are eating this cupcake, your blood sugar levels are rising rapidly when this food is being absorbed in your body. So in order to regulate sugar, the pancreas will release insulin, and insulin will essentially regulate blood sugar levels, because what the liver will also do is liver will actually be releasing bile, which will essentially end up storing fat, which is going to be released from this particular cupcake that we are eating, the sugars, and they will be converted into fat and stored as glucagon. Now, your body cells, essentially, when they would need sugar, the fat in your body cells would essentially be dissolved. And in those cases, they would be dissolved by the release of bile. And that would mean if your body needs energy, say, for example, if you go for gym, or you start, exercising, or you face the fight oblique flight response, your body would then straight away start looking at, depending on what activity you're doing, it will basically start producing, glucose, and that would mean it will start burning glucagon in your body cells, and that would convert that into sugars, which is required for you to fight that response. And this is controlled through the process of what is called homeostasis. Now, if there is too much blood sugar in your blood, then insulin will be released, and that would basically decrease the blood glucose levels. And this is triggered through the process of what is called homeostasis. So the normal sugar in the human body, if you're fasting, which is called, which sometimes when you're asked to go to the GP and you're asked to say, okay, don't have anything before you come for the blood test, that is what is called fasting sugars. So in those cases, your blood sugar levels normally tend to be 80 to 90 milligram per 100 ml of blood. And when you've had some food, then your sugar levels can be between 100 to 120, and that is considered normal. Now look at a different response of the body. Now, in some cases, what happens is, if your blood sugar level falls below an optimal level, that means your body would be feeling lethargy, you would be feeling lazy, you might feel energyless, you might feel that I'm drained in terms of energy. And then in those cases, your body is giving you a signal that you need more sugar in your body, and that would mean that the process of homeostasis kicks in on the other way around, wherein it releases chemical hormones in your body to say that the body needs more sugar. So what will happen is, the alpha cells which are released in pancreas, they start releasing glucagon. and that glucagon essentially then breaks down the glucose which is stored in body cells, and then that is released into the bloodstream, and that helps in increasing the blood sugar levels in your body. And that would mean that sometimes when you feel, say for example, if you in the morning you go and you do a run, and when you come back, what you do is you basically have a bit of an energy drink or some sort of a drink which basically provides instant boost to your body. Now, in those cases, what your body is telling you through the process of homeostasis is that the body needs more blood sugar in your blood, and that would mean that it needs to burn some fat, or you have something externally like a Monster or like a Lucozade or some sort of an energy drink to provide that immediate relief to the body, wherein the body is asking for your blood sugar levels to rise. And this particular process that we look at, which basically works through the combination of the endocrine glands working together, which is pancreas, you have the liver, you have, for example, the adrenal glands, which are releasing the hormones, or in some cases, the pituitary and the thyroid gland. This particular process wherein the endocrine system looks at working in conjunction with your other systems, but thereby trying to, control the physiological environment in the body or regulate the physiological environment in the body to make sure that your body is able to function normally, whether it is because of internal or external conditions, would be the process of homeostasis. And when we look at the number of different types of organs which are involved, we will look at thyroid, thymus, pituitary, pancreas, adrenal gland, which are the 5 main organs which would essentially be looking at, working in conjunction with the other organ systems in your body to help regulate this environment. Now, when we look at this process of homeostasis, creates a positive and a negative response in the body. Now, sometimes when you would look at in terms of the process of homeostasis, what you're going to see is that the homeostasis process would basically be looking at producing some sort of a response. But what we will do is, when we look at this particular response, we are going to term this response sometimes as positive and negative mechanisms which play into and help in regulating the let's say the equilibrium in the body. Say, for example, regulation of body temperature. So when we look at the example of a negative loop, specifically when we talk about negative mechanism, then the homeostatic process, which basically helps in the regulation of, say, an example, body temperature, would essentially work within negative loops. Now, the negative feedback loop is a loop which basically counteracts any change in the value of the parameter, whether it's optimal or narrow range of the parameters, but it will basically be looking at counteracting that particular change which is happening. Now, that change could be temperature, it could be blood sugar, it could be, anything to do with nutrients or iron level within your body. Now, when this particular negative feedback mechanism actually works, this tends to be, playing a very crucial role in bringing, say, in this case, when we are discussing the temperature of the body back to normal. Now, when we talk about the negative feedback, what it basically does is its function is to maintain a stable internal environment by dealing with any sort of counteracting changes which is trying to do away with this equilibrium. Now, what I mean by that is, for example, we go back to the same discussion that we did, is that if you suddenly step out now into the open, your body would feel or get a shock that because the temperature outside is 1 degree, and when you're in the house, the ambient temperature is 22, 23, 24 degrees. So when you go from 23, 24 degrees straight away into 1 degree and you stay there for long, your body would essentially get a shock. Now, this shock would be in the form of things like sneezing, running nose, maybe you getting some cramps in muscles, or in some cases, you would essentially start feeling extremely cold and your body would start shimmering. Now, this particular response that you get, the body would straight away go back into a loop wherein it will try its level best to regulate the let's say, the temperature of the body and try and get it back to the optimal range wherein you are still able to function in this challenging environment. Say, for example, you are not wearing proper jumpers and clothing, but you would want to continue working. Your body is going to try and create an environment internally which will allow you to function within that particular environment. So in those cases, what the body is going to do is regulate the body temperature. What it will try and do is increase the body temperature. If, for example, you've stepped out to get some log wood for your burner, or for example, you're looking at chopping some wood, or if you're going about running, what the body is going to do is allow you to exercise. That exercise will essentially help in increasing the temperature because your body will perspire. It will burn energy. Maybe it will burn energy in a bit faster rate than what normally it would do when you are in a different condition. But here, the burning of the energy or glucose in your body essentially would help produce energy, and that energy would help the body to raise the temperature. And this particular aspect of what the body is trying to do by essentially helping you regulate the temperature of the body is going to be the negative loop, which is going to be, predominantly the mechanism which will work in the context of the body, and that would be the negative feedback loop in the homeostatic process. So what I've explained on the diagram in the slide is what you see is that if your body temperature falls, what tends to happen is your blood vessels constrict so that the heat is conserved. Now, normally, and I'll relate this to the example of, normally, if people have had heart surgery or if they've had stenting in their heart, they are advised, if they are stepping out into the cold or they are going out, they should generally be wearing warm clothes. It's because their blood vessels are already very constricted. And if they step out into the cold, the further constriction of blood vessels would essentially mean that the blood flow would become constricted. And this could lead to, that person which is already vulnerable having a heart attack or angina. So in those cases, what the body would be asked to do is to wear warm clothes, make sure that you're warm, you have your GTN spray with you, and you are stepping not outside and staying outside in the open for long, because the more you stay outside, the more body temperature would fall, which would lead to blood vessels constricting. In some cases, that if it is not able to cope, your body would go into a state wherein you will start shivering, which is basically involuntary contractions your muscles are trying to do in order to generate heat. So the muscles rattling or contracting and expanding would essentially be done through the process of shimmering. And why is it involuntary? Because shimmering is not something that you can control. Your body is able to produce chemicals which allows it to use this process for a while so that it is able to produce warmth or generate heat in your body. And this heat, the body will try to retain as much as possible so that it can drive the body temperature back to normal. Now, this is the negative loop, which is the negative homeostasis feedback loop, which kicks in when the body looks at facing temperatures that it is not anticipated, and the body, tries to regulate the environment to go back and bring the temperature up. Now, if you step into, for example, hot environment, say, for example, you step into a sauna and you are on a weekend having a sauna, and you step into a sauna, what will happen is because the sauna is typically the temperature is very, very high, your body is encouraged to sweat. So what tends to happen is when you are in a climate wherein you are exposed directly to heat, say, for example, in the summers, if you stand outside in the sun, your body temperature is going to rise quite quickly. The body's blood vessel will dilate. The dilation of body blood vessels will essentially result in heat loss to the environment. Your sweat glands come into action and you start sweating, which secretes fluid from your body, which is the release of salts and water. And then when the sweat comes out, it tries to cool your skin temperature down. And the evaporation of the, let's say the sweat or the water droplets from your skin essentially helps evaporate the heat in your body. And that is why through this process, the heat regulation is controlled, wherein the body tries to bring the temperature down. And this again is a negative feedback loop, because the body is going into a process wherein it is going to allow you to essentially understand that you are in excessive heat environment, you need to find shade. If you are not able to find shade and you still remain within that environment, your body would send a message out to say you need to start sweating. The secretory glands or your lymphatic glands will come into action. They will start releasing sweat, and that sweat, when it goes and accumulates on your skin, would try to cool down your temperature, and that itself would be the process through which the body tends to lose heat. And this again is a negative feedback loop, which basically helps regulate down the temperature in your body. And that is why homeostasis as a process is very, very important. Is that okay? Any questions on this so far? Okay, now let's look at the positive. So one, we've understood the negative. Let's look at the positive side of, that is what I've explained here in this slide in terms of how, the explanation of this particular diagram. Now let's look at a positive mechanism or a positive feedback process which happens. So when we talk about homeostasis, we talk about the optimal or the narrow range. So when we talk about this particular range, what we are looking at is either the body will react negatively or the body will react positively. But the idea in both cases here, through that feedback loop or the mechanism, is to basically bring the body back to its normal or natural working conditions. And in this case, the homeostatic process essentially would be either working positively or it will be working negatively to initiate signals in the body to help bring the body back to its normal functioning condition. Now, when we look at the positive mechanism plays again a crucial part, because the positive feedback loop is a regulatory mechanism within the homeostatic process where the output of the process amplifies, increases. It amplifies essentially or reinforces the initial change which is happening, and it again would try to restore the equilibrium to bring it within the optimal or the narrow range which is required for the body to function. Now, let's look at a positive feedback. Now, positive feedback that I want to bring out is basically looking at clotting. If you had a cut, if you've had an injury, essentially your body's made to restore the blood flow or stop the oozing of the blood or the loss of blood from that wound, essentially would be done through the process of what is called blood clotting. Now, when we looked at the process of blood clotting, what in infectious diseases, if you recall, the white blood cells and the platelets essentially swing into action in order to stop and form a layer over that part where the blood, the skin barrier is broken. And internally, if we go into the details of that, what you will generally see that because the blood vessel has got ruptured or punctured, that is where the blood starts flowing out. And what this process would require the body to do through the homeostatic process would be to go in and create a blood clot, which would form, platelets would start forming a sieve, which would stop the flow of blood going out of that ruptured blood vessel. Now, when we look at blood clotting, this is where the platelets that we talked about would release a chemical that would promote the process of what is called aggregation and coagulation. So the blood will get coagulated there to form a clot, and this process, which when fully formed would actually stop any sort of excessive bleeding which is happening from that ruptured blood vessel. Now, what you see on this slide is that what I've explained is how the homeostatic process would essentially, work. So when we look at this particular process through which how this would work is that when we see the blood clot essentially forming, in the human body where the blood pressure essentially is going to be controlled by the positive, feedback loop of the homeostatic process, would be the way in which the body was essentially stop at the loss of any blood which is happening because of that injured or ruptured blood vessel or the wall, and that is where it starts the process of clotting essentially. Now, what is involved in that particular thing? So if you see this kind of there is a membrane called fibrin, and this membrane is, which is basically called fibrinogen, is the molecule which gets released by a chemical called thrombin. And this thrombin or prothrombin essentially then releases the chemical called fibrinogen, and this fibrinogen essentially then forms what is called a loose meshwork, like a sieve around which the blood cells would start, collating together. So it will not allow the blood to flow outside. Now, when this particular thing happens, it takes a bit of time for the mesh to be created with fibrinogen. So some part of your blood you would still see that it is continuing to flow out. But if you keep the where the cut has happened, normally the doctors or GPs or people give you advice that keep it constricted, keep it pressed, so that it stops the flow of blood. Now, what that is allowing it to do is primarily that the homeostatic process is using the positive feedback loop in the body by releasing chemical hormones like thrombin. And those chemical hormones like thrombin would start releasing what is called fibrinogen. And this fibrinogen at some stage would start the process of amplifying. That means increasing the process of blood clotting, thereby making it at some stage stopping the blood flow which is releasing from the wound. Now, this process which happens, what is this process? This process is bleeding. Essentially, if you've injured something and there's a cut, you're bleeding. So essentially, this process of bleeding, essentially, when the blood is flowing out of the human body or any part of the body or any organ of the body, this could be an internal injury or it could be an external injury. External injury is where you see the blood coming out, or you see a skin being ruptured or cut being put into place, or your bones being broken, and you are seeing external symbols of it which are visible to you, to the human eye. But injuries can sometimes be internal as well, and you have internal bleeding which is happening, and that can only be detected if x-rays are done or scans are done, and that can be life-threatening because externally you can see and you can address it, but internally if it is happening, the body's internal mechanism of homeostatic process would start to kick in to stop that bleeding, which is maybe sometimes when you're in a car accident, you have punctured lungs because the impact was so strong that your lungs have got punctured. So there is a probability that some of the internal organs of your body are damaged, although you might not see external signs of it. Sometimes when you have a fall, the doctor or the GP uses a word called concussion. Now, what is concussion? This is when we talk about concussion, essentially, that is basically the part wherein your body's, let's put it this way, becomes maybe some part of the organ of the body which has taken the hit. Either that will become unconscious, will be knocked off in terms of not being able to work properly, or in some cases, a blow to your head. When you normally have a fall, you will feel a bit dizzy, and that would be the process wherein your brain actually is suffering a bit of impairment, which means a loss of function. And in those cases, you would normally say that the person has suffered concussion. Now, concussion could be, obviously traumatic, and obviously, let's say, giving it an example here would be, dangerous because it might cause some sort of a brain injury and might cause some bleeding internally. So, going back to when we talk about the process of bleeding, bleeding can be internal and external. Internal, obviously, and external depends on what we can see and what we cannot see. The body will still, work through the homeostatic process to try and retain, bring the environment back, the body functioning back. Now, when we look at this particular process of bleeding, the positive feedback loop of homeostatic process comes into play. It starts to release the hormone called thrombin and platelets, and they will start to release something called fibrinogen, which will start creating a mesh, and this mesh would start accumulating the blood flow, blood cells, the platelets in particular, and not allow it to ooze out. And that would be the positive process, allowing the clotting, and the response to clotting would essentially stop the bleeding which is happening from the injured part. Now, this particular positive feedback in the loop which kicks in through the process of clotting prevents any excessive loss of blood happening. So what it will try and do is regulate and release inhibitors, which are platelets in particular, fibrinogen in particular, and most importantly, the hormone, the chemical messenger, which is prothrombin or thrombin, which would be sensitive to where the cut has happened in the body and where the bleeding is happening. So their amplification of, when I say there, I mean the hormones increase or amplification of the release of this hormone would allow the control of the excessive lot of blood happening from that wound. And this process would be again regulated through the process of homeostasis. That means there'll be specific clotting factors which are called factors X, which will come into play, factors 5, 7, and 10, which we call will come into play, and they would be involved in the positive feedback loop, thereby contributing essentially to the increase of the clotting process, and this would eventually stop bleeding. So what I've explained on the slide here is that when we talk about damage to the blood vessels, it could be intrinsic or extrinsic, internally, extrinsic externally, and then there are two different factors in play. And these factors would be optimal and narrow range, which the body would try to restore the equilibrium to, because there is a rupture of the blood vessel or a number of blood vessels, and that is leading to blood being released from the body. Now, in order to stop that blood flow, the process would basically take the loop of providing positive feedback by releasing hormones like thrombin and prothrombin. Now, the brackets indicate prothrombin 2 and thrombin 2A, which are named and very specific to the type of hormones the body is releasing, and they would release further, chemicals or messengers within the blood, which is fibrinogen, and that would start to form a mesh around where the wound is, and that would stop. And over a point in time, this amplification, the word that I'm using, that means increase, or amplification means increase of the release of this particular hormone or chemical messenger, thrombin or prothrombin, would essentially mean more of fibrinogen to be released, thereby stopping the flow of blood. And within that, there are factors 5, 7, 10, which are going to come into play, which are again obviously named, factors specifically identified for the process of clotting, and that would essentially stop the blood flow. And this would be the positive loop that we see as an example of how the body would try to stop the clotting of blood, stopping the release of blood happening because of the ruptured blood vessel by initiating the process of clotting, and that would be the homeostatic positive loop or positive feedback that would work within the body. So what here we need to understand in summary is the process of homeostasis, which is basically the regulation of system in the body, which regulates the or a self-regulating process or a system within the body that regulates the parameters in such a way that it allows the proper functioning of the organ systems within the body. Now, your body could be faced with fear or flight, fight or flight kind of responses when it is required. So you can see this as a positive or a negative response which is required by the body to be created. And what we need to know is one example of what a positive response would be and one example of what a negative response would be that the homeostatic process would trigger. And that is what we've understood by going into the detail of, understanding the positive and negative feedback loop. Is that okay? Any questions on this? Okay, good stuff. Now, going back to endocrine system and what is the role of endocrine system in maintaining the homeostatic process. So in a nutshell, if I have to say, these are the various different types of glands that are basically involved and make up the endocrine system. So the pineal gland, the pituitary, the parathyroid, the adrenal glands, the pancreas, and then reproductive glands, which is ovaries and testes in the case of males and females, or females and males. Now, these organs are responsible for releasing what are called hormones. And hormones are nothing but chemical messengers which control and coordinates the body metabolism, the energy levels, the reproduction, growth, development, and responses to injury, stress, and your mood, which typically happens. So that is why the endocrine, system is very important when we look at the internal body environment and the regulation of the internal body environment, so that it is able to function, it basically is able to then provide an environment wherein the body and body organs are able to function normally. And this regulation of functioning of the body and body organs naturally in the body can be done through regulation of temperature, the pH levels, the water levels, the blood glucose level, the iron concentration in your body. And this generally happens through release of what is called, chemicals or basically hormones. And depending on what particular gland is or what particular type of hormone is required to maintain that internal equilibrium, different organs would release different types of hormones. Now, just to give you an example with a bit of a different perspective, when you say, and when we talk about, animals are in heat, for example, sometimes of the year, if some of you have, pets, and if one of them is a female, normally you would see that they come into heat at certain point in time during the course of the year, which is a natural cycle. Now, in those cases, what is happening is that the body is releasing more of, in the case of females, it is releasing more of estrogen, which is a hormone which regulates or creates, let's say, regulates the reproductive environment of the females. In the case of males, it is testosterone. Now, it might be different in different animals or different types of animals within the mammal, but generally they remain the same. The glands typically tend to be the same. Now, when we say that when this is supposed to be regulated, what this regulation means that the glands responsible for releasing those hormones are releasing more of it than what is required. And the body would then look at, obviously giving a response accordingly. So in some cases, when we talk about reproductive organs, they are primarily during they are used primarily during the process of reproduction, and their increase in concentration or release of hormones would allow, say, for example, a pregnancy to subsist, or in some cases, say, for example, the fertilization to happen. And these are things that we would look at when we look at going into more details of understanding how each of the organs function within the endocrine system, and what their role and what kind of hormones or chemical messengers they release within the human body that would help regulate the environment within the human body. Now, I basically mentioned a video that I suggested that you need to watch. If you haven't watched yesterday, then this is the video and the link here, which basically is an 8-minute video which explains the endocrine system and the functioning of the 8 different organs that we have, and it will define and obviously show this beautifully well. So my suggestion would be to go through this particular video after this session, and then look at the corresponding handout which is on Moodle to understand the endocrine system in detail. Now, with the basics of looking at the concept of homeostasis and the endocrine system, there are 2 assessment criteria that we need to look at in this learning outcome. The first one talks about the concept of homeostasis. So, as we have covered, the concept of homeostasis is to regulate, or it's a self-regulating process through which the biological systems maintain stability and equilibrium in the internal environment of the body. That means it allows the body to function normally, or in some cases provides the environment, which is the body temperature, the blood glucose levels, the water level, the iron concentration, and the pH levels to be at a specific narrow oblique optimal range, which will allow the organs to function naturally, and thereby the organ systems are functioning naturally, and thereby the human body is functioning normally. Now, what deviates this process and when the functioning of the body changes, we have to look at examples of when your blood glucose sugar level rises. In some cases, the release of glucagon and the release of insulin. And in some cases, and as an example, you might want to talk about, blood clotting, and that would show both the feedback loop, whether it's the positive loop or the negative feedback loop, and that would help you cover the concept of homeostasis. Because the command verb says explain, so you're looking at about 70 to 100 words, and you're covering the term, what is homeostasis, the definition of it, why it is important, and what is the positive and negative feedback loop, which is the positive side and negative side of homeostatic process, which allows to self-regulate the body's functioning or the biological systems in the body functioning within the human body. The second assessment criteria talks about, again, explain. So it talks about how the endocrine system is well suited for maintaining homeostasis. Now, why is it that one of the questions should come to your mind is, why is it that the cardiovascular system or the respiratory system or the digestive system cannot take over and help in this process of homeostasis? Can you think of a reason why it does not help in the regulation of homeostasis, or why is endocrine system very suited to regulate this particular system? Any ideas? So one of the things which should come to your mind straight away when we talk about the process of homeostasis should be hormones. The chemicals which regulate, or molecules. What are hormones? Hormones are molecules that are produced by the endocrine gland. And they include, these glands are hypothalamus, pituitary glands. Sometimes the reproductive glands is what we call also the word, rather than talking ovaries and testes, we basically say gonads. So gonads is a word which basically generally refers to reproductive glands. So when we look at hormones, they are molecules or chemical messengers which are produced by endocrine gland. What are the endocrine glands in your body? Hypothalamus, pituitary gland, thymus gland, thyroid gland, adrenal gland, and gonads, and pancreas. So these are the 7 different glands in the endocrine system. Now, what is the term endocrine? Endocrine implies that it will be, what is the actual meaning? The biological term endocrine basically implies that your body is going to produce a specific stimuli. That is the actual meaning of the word endocrine, which means that it is going to produce a specific stimuli. That means a specific action or a specific release of certain of these chemical messengers, which are going to be released in the bloodstream, and they are then going to be carried by the blood to the target cells where this change has happened, where the natural environment has got changed, or where the normal functioning has got broken. And these hormones will target these specific cells, which would allow them to release further chemicals to help deal with that particular situation. And this interaction between the hormone and the receptor cells, where the normal functioning has been broken, is a cascade of biochemical reactions that happens, which is homeostasis. So why is endocrine system very important in maintaining homeostasis? Because the chemical messengers or hormones are produced only by the endocrine glands. Heart does not produce any hormone. Your lung does not produce any hormone. Your liver does not produce any hormones. For example, your kidneys do not produce hormones. Hormones or chemical messengers are only produced by endocrine glands. And these endocrine glands are thyroid, pituitary, hypothalamus, pancreas, adrenal glands, and gonads, which is your reproductive organs. So because they release these hormones, which are going to further create, when they are released in the blood, they will further, create specific action, whether it will be a positive or a negative reaction, in order to restore the equilibrium or the internal environment functioning of the body, would be possible only through the use of endocrine system. Now, how does this work? The homeostatic process has a positive and a negative feedback loop, and depending on whether it requires a positive response, that means to maintain the optimal environment, or whether it requires a negative response, which is to bring it into the narrow range of where the organs are going to function naturally, excuse me, would be essentially through the homeostatic process. And that is why the endocrine system would be the most suited to work in maintaining the internal environment of the body. And that is what you need to explain in the second assessment criteria. Now, we have done this explanation by looking at 2 specific examples. One, when your body, when your body actually reacts to the extreme cold temperatures. And the other would be when you're essentially looking at recovering from a operative surgery. And they would be examples of how you would essentially mention that the endocrine system is important as the only system through which the homeostatic process can be maintained within the body. And the reason why that is because of the chemical messengers or hormones. So that brings us to the end of this particular unit. Now, any questions at this stage?
No, for me.
Anybody
So,
else?
sorry, what causes the hormonal imbalances?
So, what causes the hormonal imbalances? So when you look at what causes the hormonal imbalances, first of all, when we talk about hormonal, imbalance, what we need to look at is we need to understand that that means the body in some cases is secreting excessive amount of that hormones into our bloodstream. And that would essentially mean that there's a medical condition. That means some of your body organs or some of the internal environment of your body is not functioning well. And that hormonal imbalance, which is getting created because it is either related to, say, for example, reasons of medication. In some cases, different medications, would, let me put it this way, different, if you have hormonal imbalance, that can happen because of various reasons. One could be your body is not functioning properly. That means some of the organs or organ systems are effectively malfunctioning. Now, the malfunctioning of the organ systems can happen because of certain types of treatment, certain types of medication, which might be averse to your body. In some cases, these could also be genetic. Like, for example, we do find that some people have excessive growth during their teenage years and they become quite tall. Now, if the average human height is roughly between 6 to 6 and, roughly about 6 feet, but some people or some typical race of people's, the height could be 6.5, 7. Now, what has happened in those cases is they have had an hormonal imbalance in their body. That means the pituitary gland, the thymus gland has released more hormones, which has led to a faster development of bone and bone muscle tissue, and thereby they gaining excessive height. So when you talk about hormonal imbalances, it could be because of a lot many reasons. This is a very wide and a very, let's say, subjective question. Hormonal imbalances we could look at can happen because of medical conditions, can happen because of stress. Because if you remember the first slide which I put forward, the endocrine system essentially looks at managing a couple of things. It manages your mood, your, there is a particular sentence that I put here, which I want you to look at. So what does the endocrine system manage in your body? It manages these things. This is the most important bit. And your answer is in this particular, the question that you've asked is basically going to be, the answer is in this. So endocrine system basically manages the metabolism, energy levels, reproduction, growth, development, injury, stress, and mood swings in your body. Now, when you have an hormonal imbalance, why do you have an hormonal imbalance? Because these things are not working optimally. That means you're maybe having excessive stress, which is where your body is actually trying to release more of cortisol, and prolonged stress can lead to hormonal imbalances, because if you have more of the chemical hormone like cortisol released in your body and it stays within your body, it does not go out of your body, then this can have what is called prolonged ill effects. And that would mean, in order to balance the release of cortisol in the body, some of the other endocrine glands would release other hormones. So like adrenaline, adrenaline is basically another hormone which is released to balance your stress hormone cortisol. Your other part of the question that I could respond to is when you say what causes hormonal imbalance, that is your question. So hormonal imbalance can be caused by eating too much, diet and nutrition. So if I'm addicted to a particular type of diet, that would cause some sort of a hormonal imbalance in the body. And over a point in time, I would get to see those effects. So for example, I eat, for example, a lot of meat, red meat in particular. Now that would create a bit of a disequilibrium, and my body's equilibrium in terms of digestion and other things would change. And in those cases, you would see the adrenal glands, which are on top of your kidneys, and pancreas releasing more of acidic juices to, let's say digest meat. And in those cases, what will happen is excessive amount of proteins would start developing in the body, and that would mean your kidneys would have the propensity of having kidney stones, your urinary or excretory system will develop something. So in some cases, what will happen is the hormonal imbalance is going to be caused by your diet or the kind of nutrition that you're having. Hormonal imbalances in females can also happen when menopause happens at the age of 45 or thereabouts. That means your ovaries would stop producing, let's say, cells. And in those cases, you would be doing away with estrogen levels in your body. So the estrogen levels decrease. And that decrease of estrogen levels would need to be counteracted by medication, which sometimes is prescribed so that the body can, does not go into a bit of mood swing. You do not have hangovers, or you do not have anxiety attacks and things like that, which are known to be the causes and effect of menopause. Now, as I mentioned, this is a subjective question. It could be medical conditions which people are born with, genetic conditions, for example, in some cases wherein there could be thyroid disorders, and that would mean your body metabolism is extremely high. So sometimes people eat quite a lot in order to maintain that body metabolism. It could be because of environmental factors in terms of where you are, living, or where your body is exposed to. So people who generally live in colder regions, with people generally who live in tropical climate, or other types of temperate or tropical climate kind of regions, their bodies and their body mechanisms would be slightly different. Use of, say, for example, certain types of things could also change your lifestyle, and that could mean that your body could have different let's say the body would basically react to those kind of changes accordingly, and that would mean hormonal imbalance. So there could be wide number of factors for this, but generally speaking, when we talk about hormonal imbalance, you're looking at your body producing more or less of these because of certain conditions, and these conditions would then regulate how your body metabolism is, what your energy levels are, how your growth and development is happening, and how your body responds to any sort of injury, stress, or any sort of response which are required in flight. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's okay.
Good stuff. Any other questions? Anybody else?
So, just one more, because I was listening to one documentary and it was saying like the O positives, as a O positive, you can have more meat, but then if it can also cause hormonal imbalances, then how true is that?
This is something you'll have to read about, because this is maybe published in a specific article. There is no such regulation. To the best of my knowledge, this is not dependent on what kind of blood group you have. It does not mean that O positive or A positive or AB negative people, these are antigens in your blood. Now, these antigens essentially make you susceptible to when you need blood transfusion, or when you, say, for example, need medication. That is where the pH and the blood pH level is essentially tested against when medications are being given. So whether you are allergic, you could be showing a particular type of reaction, would be the case that would happen. This has not got to do with anything in terms of, O positive getting more meat and all that. That is, I think, total nonsense, unless proven by research, or, a research paper has been published. No,
Yeah.
Misinformation.
Okay. Thank you so much.
No worries. Anybody else? Any other question? Okay, so basically now what we have to do in this particular unit, in order for us to get a good grasp of what we have covered, you have to do a bit of reading. And this reading essentially would be useful because you need to, at the end of the day, understand the various systems. And, when we say the various systems, you have to also understand, go through the demos. When I say demo, I mean the videos that I've mentioned, and then read these handouts without fail. So when we look at the different systems, you need to go through nervous system, digestive system, excretory system, endocrine system, respiratory system, cardiovascular system. Go through this handout of homeostasis, and then what makes the body, these systems work together. These are basic minimum handouts that you have to read along with the videos that I mentioned before you even go and attempt this particular unit's assignment, because the assignment is pretty simple. It is theoretical. There is no rocket science. If you have read these and you've gone through these videos, you'd be able to do a very good job in terms of bringing some of the texts that you've read, back into the assignment. So I would sincerely suggest that do a bit of reading to bring up your knowledge and also understand some of the concepts which are given in order to bring out examples. Because when you look at doing the assignment for this unit, it is more going to be about examples that you quote and bring out in terms of, differentiating your work for grading. So having to understand these systems and examples which are given here in detail would be useful for you to, kind of go in and do a good job. So this will also mean that you'll be looking at bringing yourself up to date with some of the knowledge required, because we have touched on these. Some of you must have, who have taken biology in their year 10 or GCSEs and A levels, would have actually studied this in detail, because all the organ systems we studied during the year 10, year 11, and year 12. So it might be a trip down your memory lane to refresh and revise, but this is a basic must that you have to do. Again, there are books available which I can provide, which will be 200, 300, 400 pages long for each of the systems for you to read. But these chapters or these kind of articles which are brought in are very concise, or the most concise possible, in 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 pages, I think. But you would need to do a good thorough read of these to be able to understand most of them as far as the details of this system is concerned or this unit is concerned. Now, there is a article on homeostasis as well, and some part of it that you have seen in the presentation and examples I've taken out from this particular article, but it also goes in and explains how the other systems work in the case of homeostasis. So we have looked at endocrine, because endocrine system and the second assessment criteria was focused primarily on explain how endocrine system is well suited to maintaining homeostasis. But you'll get a very good perspective of looking at some of the other systems and how they work to help in maintaining the internal environment of the body, and how they work when the homeostatic process kicks into the body. So that is also covered and given, in terms of this particular unit. Now, for those of you who are interested in understanding the body composition, the pH balance, when we say our blood pressure is 120/80, which is primarily the optimal blood pressure, this is the pH balance, this is the iron concentration, this is, the water balance in the body, those bits, and what are the various different types of chemicals or elements like magnesium, potassium, sodium, which are required to be, calcium, which are required to be within the body. They are also covered in detail here, and they will give you some knowledge. As a nurse, I think when we look at testing, when sometimes you're asked a question, are you allergic to penicillin or are you allergic to any, medication? That is where this pH balance or the antigen versus your blood antigen is normally used to understand whether you will be sensitive or allergic to any particular chemical formula which is administered to you as a medication during the process when you are admitted in the hospital or otherwise. So these are things that you need to be aware of, and these articles that are put together essentially would, be the very good summary of you getting to understand how the human body and human body systems work, and their role in particular when we talk about in maintaining the internal body environment, which is the process of homeostasis. Now, once this has been done, my suggestion would be to look at going through the assignment discussion session, which I've already recorded, and that is available up here on Moodle. So when I click on this particular session and the assignment brief, I have Boniface, some of the others, Abigail, I'm not able to use system, I don't know what is Moodle. You might need to burn the midnight oil and, seriously need to getting to use the system and put some hours in to understand, because at university, you will not be able to do anything, because that is how these systems would be provided and the study material will be provided. There is no way that I can give you a medication and a pill to say, okay, please take this pill and it will help you do the assignment, or this is the way you will be looking at, writing the assignment. This is an art. This is something that you will need to perfect yourself with. And there are ample places wherein you can do this. So first and foremost, go through some of these bits that we have provided here in terms of what are command verbs. Look at the Harvard referencing presentation, which is up on Moodle. And these are important bits that will allow you to understand how to write an assignment. And for those of you who come back to me every now and then asking for, I'm more than happy to help you and more than happy to spoon feed. But you always come in and ask on WhatsApp, can I get this assignment brief? Can I get that assignment brief? I just don't understand that why you are not able to get it from Moodle when everything is there. So the assignment brief for this particular unit is here, which is a Word document. So, and when you look at this, it will download to your local PC, your machine. When you click on this, it will ask you to download. And the reason why we provided this in Word document is because you're going to be using this document to do the assignment. So the cover sheet and everything will be in the assignment itself. All you have to do is start filling it in and go to the last page, and towards the last page, insert a page and do the assignment, or start writing the tasks out which are given in the assignment brief. So my suggestion is everything is provided. The assignment discussion session, for those of you who need to understand how to write an assignment, it's a 1 hour discussion that I put in here, 1 hour, 24 minutes. I don't think I can explain anything better than this, rather than, talking you through it or meeting you face to face. This is actually showing you how to write an assignment. And I've gone into details of basically every step, how to write the question, how to find the answer, which slides to look at, how to format the document, how to look at including things which is going to give you a higher grade. All those things have been discussed and provided. So this unit primarily is a unit wherein I would suggest you need to spend 2 to 3 weeks reading, and then basically read the assignment brief first. Because what I will do is, when I read the assignment brief, I will clearly know these are the bits which are going to be required for me to put together my assignment. And then I will go and do my reading of the handouts which I've got, so that what I'm doing is I'm doing a bit of cheating. I'm doing a bit of concentrated reading, but that's fine. But that is where it'll help me when I read. I will start underlining or start copying and pasting that text into a document, which I will then paraphrase and write it in my own words with examples to complete my assignment. So my suggestion would be, watch the assignment discussion session and then start attempting the assignment, because the assignment is purely theoretical. It is divided into 4 questions. Let me briefly show you that as well. And that bit would be, looking at, so this is the Word document that I've downloaded. You need to fill some of these details in, on this side, including your signature, word count. And then in the assignment, it says there are, as seen in the assignment, you must answer question 1. So question 1 is mandatory. Everybody has to do. Now, apart from question 1, you have to do any other 2 questions using diagrams as appropriate. So I could do question 2 and 3, I could do 2 and 4, I could do 3 and 4. 1 is a must. Question 1 you have to do, everybody has to do. But you could do question 2 and 4, I could do 2 and 3, I could do 3 and 4, I could do, in any combination. So out of the 4, I have to do 3. The reason why this has been done is that it will require you to cover a particular type of system. So question 2 is focused on digestive system. Sorry. Question 3 is focused on respiratory system and circulatory system. Question 4 is focused on excretory system. And it is the 7 systems that we have to look at learning. So endocrine system and homeostatic process is actually covered, in question 1, which everybody will do. But apart from that, if you want to look at digestive system, now if I just briefly show you my full screen, because I want to, and that will give you a perspective in terms of how I would look at going into details. So for example, I want to look at doing question 2. So what I will do is I will go to the digestive system printout, And this digestive system printout is a 39-page printout minus, table of contents and all. Maybe about 30 pages are useful. So it says outline the process of starch breakdown by digestive system. So first I will start with digestive system. What is it? Put a picture down and then go into the handout and talk about how the starch breakdown happens. So copy and, basically learn from where the starch part is given and then explain. Starch is basically food breakdown happening in your digestive system. Now, if I want to go and do along with question 2, question 3, then what I'm going to do is basically look at the respiratory system handout, because question 3 talks about respiratory system and its function. So this would cover the respiratory system. And then it also has circulatory system. So what I'll do is go back into my handout and then basically choose circulatory or cardiovascular system. So circulatory system is also called the cardiovascular system. So this is a 40-page handout which covers the cardiovascular system in detail. Now, if I need to take an image of this, I will need to take a screenshot and put it in my, assignment. So I'm taking a screenshot. I will insert it into, my question here. When you start doing your assignment, go to the last page, go to insert and go insert page break. That will give you a fresh page here. Then what you do is your question 1 you're doing, you've decided on question 1, copy question 1 and put it here. Then after that again, go and insert page break. So after that, I'm doing say question 2 and 3. So what I'll do is I'll copy question 2 and 3, go back to this page in the last, put question 2 and question 3, and then here again, insert a page. So I will now keep expanding by pressing enter. And what will happen is I will keep doing my part in terms of the assignment. So in terms of digestive system or cardiovascular system, what I would need to do, I will start with inserting a diagram like this, make it slightly smaller, and then start writing about this in terms of explaining the digestive system. So it would not disturb the formatting of your document, but at the same time allow you to clearly put the questions down in a very clear way. In part A, press enter here. Start writing by creating space. Part B, first part, write it here. Second part, write it here. Third part, write it here. And then delete this LO1, LO2 because we know you're attempting learning outcome 1 and 2. And then you start writing a response here. You need to know what the command verb is. Explain 70 to 100 words. Describe 100 to 125 words. Example would mean you need to put an image here and then explain the image. Using examples, explain. So this assignment has a minimum word count of 3,500 words. So you would get where you'll get the word count from by looking at the examples, by looking at reading the handouts, and that is what will allow you to do the assignment. So this requires a bit of reading, but before you do that, go through all the videos, read all the handouts for the units. If you're going to do a structured way of following this unit, and then go and listen in to the assignment discussion session, which is where it will tell you exactly how to do the assignment. You don't need to do the 4 questions. It is very clearly written. Read the assignment brief in detail. You must answer question 1 and any other 2 questions using diagrams where appropriate. Lots of pictures, lots of diagrams, lots of tables, because this is a graded unit which shows your creativity. And I've explained how, and some of you have been on these sessions with me for now successive 4-5 units. So you clearly know why and where you can achieve merit / distinction grades. Is that okay? So I hope this session has been useful and you've got useful insights in terms of how you would go about, essentially doing the assignment. The copy of this recording and the updated presentation would be up on your Moodle in a couple of minutes just after the session, and I'll drop you a text message as always. So till then, obviously, if you think of any other questions or any doubts that you have, feel free to write to me and I'll come back to you with additional details. But generally speaking, everything that you need for this particular unit is already up on Moodle and is in great amount of detail. So you should be able to do a good job in terms of, obviously writing the assignment for this particular unit.